Have you ever wondered how a nation born from the darkness of sin could become part of God's grand plan of salvation? The Moabites, descendants of Lot, emerged from scandal and betrayal, raising proud fortresses to challenge Israel, the people led by God. They wove cunning traps, defied his wrath, and crumbled under the weight of prophetic judgment. Yet, from the ashes of their condemnation, a humble Moabite woman rewrote history, paving the way to the Messiah. This is not just a tale of war and destruction. It is a journey of grace, where the most painful mistakes are transformed by God into a beacon of hope. Could the story of Moab be whispering a profound truth about your own life? Prepare to uncover a forgotten chapter of the Bible, brimming with drama, intrigue, and unexpected redemption. If you're ready to unveil this mystery, drop the number 777 in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe to the channel to join us on a journey from the strongholds of Moab to the fields of Bethlehem, where God weaves miracles from broken pieces. Let's dive in. Picture a sky no longer blue but shrouded in thick, swirling columns of smoke, coiling like giant serpents. Distant screams mingle with the deafening roar of explosions as fire and brimstone rain down from heaven in an unstoppable storm of divine wrath. This was Sodom and Gomorrah, two cities drowned in sin, now reduced to ashes under God's judgment. Amid the chaos, a man named Lot, Abraham's nephew, fled with a pounding heart, gripped by fear. Clinging to his side were his two daughters, their bare feet stumbling over jagged rocks as they raced into the darkness of the distant mountains. Genesis 19:17 records, "As soon as they had been brought outside, one of the angels said, 'Flee for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the plain.' They found refuge in a cold, desolate cave where the wind howled through the cracks like whispers of despair. Gone were the sounds of children's laughter and merchants' calls. Only a heavy silence weighed on the shoulders of the three survivors who had just escaped the scythe of destruction. Lot, once surrounded by the prosperity of Sodom, was left with only his two daughters and a shattered heart. Raised in a world steeped in sin, his daughters now faced a harsh reality. They believed no man remained on earth to carry on their family line. Fear, loneliness, and the sense that the world had ended drove them to a decision that makes us shudder when we read it today. Genesis 19:31-32 recounts, "The firstborn said to the younger, 'Our father is old, and there is no man on earth to come into us after the manner of all the world. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, so that we may preserve offspring through our father.' They did so, and Lot, in his drunkenness, was unaware of their actions. It was an act born of desperation, but also an indelible stain. The firstborn bore a son and named him Moab, meaning from the father. Genesis 19:37 states, "The firstborn bore a son and named him Moab. He is the ancestor of the Moabites to this day." How could a nation born from a moment of sin in the darkness of a cave rise to challenge God's chosen people? This story is not just a dark chapter in history. It is a testament to the Bible's honesty. God does not hide human brokenness or gloss over mistakes, but lays them bare under His light, showing us that even from the worst beginnings, He can weave a story far greater. Imagine standing in that cave, hearing the wind whistle through the rocks, feeling the despair of Lot and his daughters. Would you have acted differently? Or would fear have led you to flawed choices too? The Bible does not judge but narrates, urging us to look into our own hearts and ask, what legacy will our decisions today leave for tomorrow? The origin of the Moabites was a scandal, a tale steeped in tragedy and sin. Yet, astonishingly, their story does not end in the shadows of that cave. From a beginning that seemed irredeemable, a nation arose, bearing the mark of brokenness, but also holding the potential for something far greater. Something only God could foresee. From the cold confines of a cave, the Moabites rose like an unexpected marvel of history. Envision the first generations carrying the haunting memory of Sodom and Gomorrah, forging a new life on the rugged terrain east of the Dead Sea, now modern-day Jordan. The land was unforgiving, with barren limestone hills and sprawling deserts, but the Moabites transformed it into a formidable kingdom. They built bustling cities where the clang of blacksmiths' hammers echoed each morning, and vibrant markets buzzed with merchants hawking wine from Sibmah, renowned as far as the distant ports of Tyre. Sturdy city walls, like those of Ar and Dibon, stood tall, testaments to the strength and ambition of a people once defined by sin. Moab's culture flourished, yet it bore the mark of stark contrast with Israel. At the heart of their cities stood temples to Chemosh, their god of war and fertility, where altars burned with constant incense. Their rituals, sometimes involving human sacrifice, were inseparable from Moabite life. 2 Kings 3:27 recounts a Moabite king in desperation, offering his own son on the city wall to appease Chemosh, revealing the fervor and darkness of their religion. Yet, Moab also had moments of brilliance. Lush vineyards blanketing hillsides, artisans carving stone inscriptions like the Mesha stele discovered in the 19th century, which boasted of Moab's victories over Israel, a testament to their pride. Picture walking the stone-paved streets of Ar, hearing children's laughter and smelling fresh bread baking in roadside ovens. But look closer, and you'd see the wary glances of adults, their eyes fixed westward, where whispers of another nation grew louder. Israel, led by a mighty God, was drawing near. Moab's rise was not just a story of power, but of unease. They knew that no matter how high their fortresses stood or how strong their armies were, the people across the Dead Sea wielded a power beyond their comprehension. The contrast between Moab and Israel is a pivotal theme. While Israel was guided by a covenant with Yahweh, sustained by manna from heaven and protected by a pillar of fire, Moab relied on their own strength, their gods of stone and bronze. But this pride, this confidence in their fortresses and deities, laid the foundation for the conflicts to come. The Moabites were not just Israel's neighbors. They were a spiritual challenge, a nation that would force Israel to confront a question. Would they remain faithful to God, or be swayed by the allure of Moab's offerings? Now, step into a tense moment in history, where 2 nations teetered on the brink of conflict. Israel, freed from Egypt, journeyed through the wilderness, guided by a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. Numbers 22:1 records, the Israelites set out and camped in the plains of Moab across the Jordan from Jericho. Envision this from the Moabites' perspective. Thousands of tents stretching like a sea of people, campfires flickering in the night, and songs of praise to God rising from afar. To King Balak, son of Zippor, this was not the sight of a weary people, but a storm poised to engulf his kingdom. Numbers 22:3 states, Moab was in great fear of the people, because they were so numerous. Standing on his city walls, Balak's heart likely tightened as scouts reported Israel's miracles. The Red Sea parting, Egypt's army swallowed, and an invisible but all-powerful God marching with them. He doubted his army, however strong, could face a people shielded by supernatural might. So Balak devised a plan not reliant on swords, but on curses. He sent messengers to a renowned man, a spiritual mercenary named Balaam, living near the Euphrates. Numbers 22:6 captures Balak's plea. Come now, curse this people for me, since they are stronger than me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them from the land." Imagine Balak's desperation as he pinned his hopes on Balaam, sending gold and silver to lure him across hundreds of miles to Moab. But Balak didn't realize he was not just challenging Israel, but defying their God. God appeared to Balaam at night, warning him not to curse Israel, for they were blessed, Numbers 22:12. Yet, tempted by reward, Balaam journeyed to Moab. Balak led him to mountain peaks, built 7 altars, and offered sacrifices of bulls and rams, hoping these rituals would pave the way for a curse. What followed was one of the Bible's most dramatic moments. When Balaam spoke, no curse came forth. Only blessings poured from his lips. Not once, but 3 times, he proclaimed God's favor over Israel, infuriating Balak to the point of striking the stone. Numbers 23-24. The climax came in the 3rd oracle, when Balaam, moved by the Holy Spirit, uttered a prophecy beyond his or Balak's comprehension. Numbers 24:17 declares, "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. It shall crush the borderlands of Moab." Could a curse thwart God's power? Or does the enemy become the stage for his grand plan? This prophecy was not just about Israel's triumph over Moab, but a glimpse of the Messiah, Jesus, who would shatter every force opposing God's people. Picture standing on that mountain, hearing the prophecy resound, feeling the air tremble with God's power. Balak sought to destroy Israel. But unbeknownst to him, Moab's land became the platform where God proclaimed his ultimate victory. The story of Balak and Balaam is a powerful testament that no one can hinder God's purposes. Moab, with all its pride and schemes, tried to control fate with curses, but God turned evil into good. The prophecy of a star from Jacob was not just a warning to Moab, but a promise to all humanity that the Savior would come, bringing light into darkness. This story makes us pause and ask, have we, like Balak, ever tried to control our lives with our own plans, forgetting that God holds all things? There are times we face daunting challenges, like Moab feared Israel, and seek solutions in our own strength rather than trusting God. But the Bible reminds us that even when the strongest enemies stand before us, God can turn their schemes into opportunities to reveal his power. Let's return to Moab's story. This conflict was only the beginning. Balak failed with his curses, but Moab didn't stop there. They would find another, more dangerous way to draw Israel into darkness. A trap not of swords, but of smiles and feasts, opening a new chapter of tragedy in the relationship between these 2 nations. As the fiery red sunset stretches across the hills of Moab, tables are laden with fragrant bread and sparkling wine from Sibmah, glinting in bronze cups. The soft strum of lyres blends with laughter, and Moabite women, with radiant smiles and gleaming eyes, weave through a crowd of Israelite men. No clash of swords, no thundering hooves, no warriors' cries pierce the air. Instead, there's a gentle, intimate invitation, like a whisper. Come, eat, drink, be merry. But beneath this seemingly harmless allure lies a deadly trap, pulling Israel into a spiritual abyss they never foresaw. Numbers 25:1-2 records. While Israel was staying in Shittim, the people began to have sexual relations with the women of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. What began as friendly gatherings soon led to the altars of Baal Peor, a Canaanite god tied to rituals of fertility and debauchery. Picture the scene. Israelite men, who once witnessed the Red Sea part, ate manna from heaven and drank water from a rock in the wilderness, now kneel before idols of wood and stone, joining in depraved rituals, trading the glory of the living God for mute idols. How could a joyful feast, a friendly invitation, become a gateway to spiritual death? This story chills us, for it reveals that the most dangerous temptations come not with the face of an enemy, but with the smile of a friend. The Moabite women needed no weapons, only sweet whispers, inviting glances, and promises of fleeting joy. From tables overflowing with food, they led Israel to altars where incense swirled and immoral rites intertwined. The consequences of this compromise were devastating. Numbers 25:3-5 describes God's anger. Israel yoked itself to Baal Peor, and the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel. A horrific plague swept through the Israelite camp, claiming 24,000 lives. Imagine tents once filled with laughter, now echoing with wails, families torn apart, cooking fires flickering faintly beside empty mats. Psalm 106:28-29 sums up the tragedy. They joined themselves to Baal Peor and ate sacrifices offered to the dead. Thus they provoked him to anger with their deeds, and a plague broke out among them. The terrifying truth is that Israel's fall came not from a bloody battle or an overt plot, but from a subtle temptation, creeping through moments that seemed harmless. Moab found a way to defeat Israel, not with military might, but by luring them away from their covenant with God. This is not just a historical chapter, but a timeless warning. Spiritual compromise can begin with the smallest choices, leading to consequences beyond imagination. Moab was not merely a kingdom opposing Israel on the battlefield. They were a spiritual threat, a foe more dangerous than any army. While Balak failed to curse Israel, the Moabites succeeded in setting a far more cunning trap. The temptation of culture, the allure of tradition, and the pull of idols cloaked in joy and prosperity. Envision standing in Israel's camp, watching your brothers swept into Moab's rituals, drawn by promises of pleasure and harmony. What made Moab so dangerous? Not their armies or fortresses, but their ability to make God's people forget their identity. Moab's danger lay in their refusal to declare open war. Instead, they invited, they enticed, they blurred the line between right and wrong. Baal Peor, with its sensual rituals, was not just an idol, but a symbol of a lifestyle that rejected God's holiness. Moab embodied the spiritual temptations God's people faced. Worship disguised as culture, pride masked as tradition, and depravity wrapped in sweet invitations. Jeremiah 48:29 exposes Moab's nature. We have heard of the pride of Moab. He is very proud, of his loftiness, his pride, and his arrogance. Consider this. Moab didn't just want to defeat Israel. They wanted to make Israel like them, pulling them into the path of idolatry and pride. They didn't need to strike with swords, for they knew a nation that abandons God destroys itself. Judges 3:12-14 recounts a later period when Moab, led by King Eglon, dominated Israel for 18 years, showing their influence was not fleeting. They were a constant threat, not just on the battlefield, but in the hearts of God's people. Moab's story reminds us that the most dangerous enemies don't always come with fierce faces. Sometimes they arrive with smiles, offering participation in things that seem harmless but lead to estrangement from God. Moab is not just a historical nation, but a symbol of the temptations that still lurk around us. Promises of temporary joy, worldly values cloaked in culture, and whispers that we don't need God to live the life we desire. As time passed, God's warnings rang out through his prophets, like tolling bells heralding Moab's doom. Picture standing on a Jerusalem hill around 715 BC. As the Assyrian Empire, a storm of iron and steel, swept through the Near East, devouring kingdoms with chariots and arrows. In this context, the prophet Isaiah received a burden from God, a prophecy that was both a lament and a judgment for Moab. Isaiah 15:1 opens with haunting words. For in a night, Ar of Moab is laid waste and brought to silence. Ar, Moab's impregnable fortress carved into the cliffs of the Arnon Gorge, once stood as a symbol of pride and invincibility. But Isaiah saw it fall, not in the light of day when armies could prepare, but in the darkness of night, swiftly and mercilessly, with no chance to resist. Envision Ar's bustling streets, once alive with merchants' laughter, now filled with cries and the sound of stones crumbling under invaders' boots. Isaiah didn't stop at Ar. He listed Moab's cherished cities, Nebo, Medeba, Dibon, Heshbon, Eliel, each name a dagger, foretelling the collapse of an entire kingdom. Isaiah 16 paints a tragic picture. Proud Moabite warriors fleeing like wandering birds. Isaiah 16:2. Ordinary people trudging through the desert, feet blistered, lips cracked, begging Judah for water and shelter. Sibma's famous wine, once shipped to distant ports, was trampled under Assyrian heels. The lush vineyards, once Moab's pride, burned to ash, and the limestone hills, once echoing with harvesters' songs, now whispered only with the wind through ruins. A century later, the prophet Jeremiah continued the warning with an entire chapter dedicated to Moab, Jeremiah 48. He listed their sins: pride, boasting under Chemosh's altars; mockery, laughing at Judah's pain during Babylon's attack; and violence, plundering Israel's borders when God's people were weakest. Jeremiah 48:42 pronounced the final judgment. Moab shall be destroyed as a people, because he magnified himself against the Lord. This prophecy was not just a warning, but an unalterable verdict. History bore witness to these words. In the 8th century BC, Assyria ravaged Moab, turning their cities to rubble. By the 6th century BC, Babylon finished the task, crushing what remained. Under Persian and later Roman rule, Moab dwindled to a mere province, then vanished from the geopolitical map after the 2nd century AD. Their mud brick walls crumbled, their stone inscriptions like the Mesha Stele were buried beneath Jordan soil. And the name Moab became a distant memory, just as God declared through Jeremiah. Moab shall be destroyed as a people. When God judges, can any fortress stand strong? Any kingdom remain proud before his word? Moab's story is a reminder that pride, whether cloaked in strength or culture, leads to ruin. Cities once vibrant with laughter now lie as silent stones, whispering of the consequences of turning from the living God. Moab's story is not just a chapter in ancient history, but a warning that echoes to us today. Moab used feasts, smiles, and idols to lure God's people, and they paid with destruction. This makes us ask, what altars in our lives are quietly pulling us away from God? They may not be stone idols, but modern temptations, the pursuit of success, the allure of worldly culture, or fleeting joys promising happiness but leaving emptiness. Like Israel, we too can be swayed by seemingly harmless invitations. A small moment of compromise can lead to vast consequences, as Moab drew an entire nation into ruin. Yet, the Bible shows God always offers time for repentance. Moab rejected that chance and fell. The question for us is, which path will we choose? Will we keep building proud fortresses in our hearts, or return to God before it's too late? Moab's journey doesn't end here. Though their strongholds crumbled and their name faded from maps, a spark of light emerged from the ashes. A Moabite woman, with a humble heart and steadfast faith, would step forward to change not only her own fate, but that of nations. Her story proves that even in the deepest darkness, God's grace can find a way to shine through. Under the scorching sun of Moab's plains, 3 women trudged along a dusty road, their weary feet dragging with each heavy step. Naomi, an Israelite mother, bore a face etched with hardship, her eyes clouded by tears that had not stopped falling since her husband, Elimelech, and 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, died. Beside her were her young daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, also widowed, carrying the pain of marriages cut short. They were the remnants of a family that had left Bethlehem to escape famine, hoping for a new life in Moab. But now, after 10 years, that dream lay in ashes. No husbands, no sons, only 3 broken hearts stranded in a foreign land. Ruth won 3-5 records. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. Then both sons also died, and she was left without her 2 sons or her husband. Naomi, her heart heavy with bitterness, heard that God had blessed Bethlehem with new harvests. She resolved to return home, though she had nothing left but pain and a self-given name, Mara, meaning bitter, Ruth 1:20. On the road out of Moab, she turned to Orpah and Ruth, her voice trembling with emotion, urging them to stay. Ruth 1:8-9 states, Naomi said, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord show kindness to you, as you have shown to me and to the dead." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. Orpah, tears streaming down her face, kissed Naomi goodbye and turned back, choosing the safety of familiar villages, the temples of Chemosh, and a life she had always known. But Ruth, the young Moabite woman, did something unimaginable. She clasped Naomi's hand, her eyes shining with resolve and a fierce faith. In that moment, as the wind swept through the barren fields, Ruth spoke a vow that stirred the heavens. Ruth 1:16-17 declares, "Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, if anything but death parts me from you." This was not just a pledge of loyalty to Naomi. It was a complete conversion. Ruth abandoned everything: her homeland, culture, family, and the Moabite god Chemosh. She chose Yahweh, the God of Israel, despite an uncertain future. How could a widow from a cursed nation, born from scandal and sin, make a decision that would alter the destiny of nations? Ruth's vow was a flame of faith igniting in Moab's darkness, proof that God looks not at origins, but at the heart. She did not just choose Naomi. She chose a God she had never known, a people who viewed her own as enemies. Picture that moment. A young woman at a crossroads with a painful past behind and a foggy future ahead. Yet she chose to walk by faith. This was the power of surrender, of courage, and of a love that transcended all barriers. Psalm 36:9 reminds us, "For with you is the fountain of life. In your light we see light." Ruth saw that light and stepped into it, carrying hope for a nation once defined by darkness. When Ruth arrived in Bethlehem, no flowers or songs greeted her. She was a Moabite, an outsider bearing the tainted reputation of her people, a nation that had once lured Israel into idolatry and depravity. To the Israelites, the name Moab evoked memories of betrayal and sin, like the tragedy at Shittim, where 24,000 Israelites perished due to Moab's seduction. But Ruth refused to let her past or others' suspicious glances define her. She entered Bethlehem with profound humility, ready to do whatever it took to sustain Naomi and herself, even if it meant taking on the lowliest work. Ruth 1:22 states, Naomi returned, and with her Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who came back from the land of Moab. To survive, Ruth chose to glean in the fields, gathering stray grains left behind by harvesters, a task reserved for the poor and foreigners, protected by Israelite law, Leviticus 19:9-10. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings. You shall leave them for the poor and the alien. Under the blazing sun, Ruth bent among the sheaves, her calloused hands picking up grains, her back aching from hours of labor. Sweat dripped from her brow, yet she never complained. Each grain she brought home was a testament to her sacrificial love for Naomi, the mother-in-law she chose as family. In God's marvelous providence, Ruth gleaned in the fields of Boaz, a wealthy, godly man and a kinsman of Naomi's family, eligible to act as a kinsman redeemer under the law, Leviticus 25:25. Boaz noticed Ruth not because she was a foreigner, but because he saw her diligence, loyalty, and selfless love. Ruth 2:10-12 records. When Ruth bowed to thank Boaz for his kindness, he replied, "May the Lord repay you for what you have done, and may you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." This blessing was more than recognition. It was a prophetic hint that God was weaving a greater plan through Ruth's life. Through the custom of the kinsman redeemer, Boaz redeemed Naomi's lost inheritance and married Ruth. That moment was a miraculous reversal. A Moabite widow, once an outcast, became the honored bride of a community leader. From the dusty fields where she gleaned to survive, Ruth stepped into a warm home, enveloped by love and respect. Their marriage bore Obed, who would become the grandfather of King David, the shepherd king who penned psalms under the moonlight and slew the giant Goliath. Ruth 4:17 states, "They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David." Ruth's redemption was not just a story of survival. It was proof of how God lifts the lowliest to fulfill his purposes. She not only overcame her nation's past, but became part of an eternal legacy, a crimson thread stretching from Bethlehem's fields to God's plan of salvation. Psalm 113, 7-8 praises. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with princes. Ruth embodied this truth, a woman who turned humility into a doorway to grace. Ruth's story did not end in Bethlehem's wheat fields or in Boaz's embrace. Her impact stretched across centuries, touching the very heart of God's redemptive plan. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, Jesus' genealogy is recorded with care, like a tapestry woven from names across time. Among them, from Abraham to David and to the Messiah, 4 foreign women are listed: Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. Ruth, the Moabite, stands there, not by chance, but as a mark of God's grace. Matthew 1:5 records, "Boaz was the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David the king." Pause to reflect on this wonder. A woman from Moab, a nation once cursed for its sins and judged for its pride and idolatry, became an ancestor of Jesus, the Savior of all humanity. The Messiah's bloodline carried Moab's DNA, a powerful testament that God's plan of salvation excludes no one, no matter how dark their origins. Isaiah 56:3-5 promises, "Let not the foreigner who has joined himself to the Lord say, 'The Lord will surely separate me from his people. I will give them an everlasting name.'" Ruth was the embodiment of this promise, a foreigner welcomed and honored by God. Isn't it astonishing that the Messiah's lineage bears the DNA of a once cursed nation? Ruth's story shows that God does not look at a people's reputation or past. He looks at the hearts of those who choose Him. Moab, with its shattered fortresses and fallen altars, left an unexpected legacy through Ruth. She was not just a widow seeking survival. She was chosen by God to be part of the greatest redemption story in history. Imagine the moment when Jerusalem's priests read the Messiah's genealogy and Ruth's name rang out. Some eyebrows might have risen. A Moabite? But that is how God works. He does not choose those with flawless lineages or spotless stories. He chooses the humble, those who forsake idols, to cling to Him. Romans 8:28 affirms, "We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to His purpose." Ruth was a living testament to this truth, a woman who turned a judged nation into part of the promise of salvation. Ruth's story also reminds us that God's grace is not bound by national borders or sinful pasts. Acts 10:34-35 records Peter's words, "God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears Him and does what is right is acceptable to Him." Ruth, with her simple yet steadfast faith, was accepted by God, and through her, He opened a door of salvation to all nations, from the Israelites in Jerusalem to foreigners in distant lands. Ruth's story is not just a beautiful chapter in the Bible. It is an invitation to us today. From Moab's ruins, from crumbled cities and forgotten altars, God drew Ruth like a precious jewel from the ashes. She teaches us 3 timeless lessons. First, God looks at the heart, not origins. No matter your circumstances or the stains of your past, God seeks faith and surrender. Second, sin has consequences, but grace is always available. Moab fell for its pride, but Ruth was raised up for her humility. Third, God's plan is greater than we can imagine. Who could have thought a Moabite widow would become an ancestor of the Messiah? The question for us is, no matter how dark your past, do you dare believe God can rewrite your story as He did Ruth's? Perhaps you stand at a crossroads, like Ruth on the road to Bethlehem, with old wounds behind and an uncertain future ahead. But remember her words, "Your God will be my God." That is a declaration of faith, surrender, and hope. Jeremiah 29:11 assures, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." God, who transformed Ruth from a foreigner into part of His lineage, still seeks hearts ready to trust Him. No past is too dark, no story too small for Him to redeem. Ruth's story is a guiding light, drawing you closer to God's infinite grace. It reminds us that no matter where you start, God can lead you to a destination beyond your dreams. From Bethlehem's wheat fields to Jerusalem's empty tomb, Ruth's story is a promise that God's grace always finds a way, even through the ruins of a broken past. From the dusty roads of Moab to the wheat fields of Bethlehem, from proud fortresses reduced to ashes to a humble heart that changed history, the story of the Moabites is a symphony of judgment and grace. They defied God with schemes, lured His people with temptation, and paid with destruction. But from those ruins, a Moabite woman rose, choosing faith over her past, becoming a crimson thread leading to the Savior. This story is not just about a nation, it's about how God takes human brokenness and weaves an eternal masterpiece. Now ask yourself, what chapter are you writing in your own story? Will it be the path of Moab's pride or the humble road of the woman who changed destiny? Share your thoughts in the comments. What moved you most in this story? Hit the like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to the channel to keep exploring inspiring Bible journeys. May God, who turned Moab's ashes into a part of his salvation plan, guide you through every darkness and write new chapters of hope in your life. See you in the next video, where we'll uncover more mysteries of his grace.